Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Damn Podcast. I am your host, Angie Machado. Joined with me, as always, is Beaver Blitz beat writer down in Corvallis, Jake Hedberg. Jake, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Angie, what about yourself?
I am good. It's sunny in Portland. I just returned late last night from a trip down to Arizona. So we are going to talk a little bit about that game down in the desert. I was there live. You were watching on TV.
Yep.
Not the way Oregon State fans were hoping it would turn out, but we are going to talk about that loss to Arizona. We are going to look at the Pac-12 kind of as a whole, where everyone sits here with the last, third of the season left to go. We're going to preview Colorado and kind of give you guys some nuts and bolts and who you should watch for and what Oregon State needs to do to right the ship. And then we're going to take some viewer questions. So if you have a question and you're watching us live, make sure to put that in the comments. Otherwise, we'll be pulling questions from beaverblitz.com in the lodge. So, Jake, let's just jump right in because there's a lot to talk about in that Arizona loss. Lots of discussion, play calls, clock management, DJU. Let's talk offense first. I think that's probably the best place to start. DJU did not have his most efficient game, but give me your thoughts on the performance as a whole.
Yeah, I thought the offense, they tried to push the ball downfield a whole lot more vertically, where the last couple of weeks, more of DJ's success had come from the 10 to 15 yard out routes where Silas Bolden, Anthony Gould can create separation and create space and pick up chunk plays and really use their athletic ability to pick up yards after the catch as well. But they kind of steered away from that. You kind of saw it in the first drive or two where TJ hit both Josiah and Gould for first downs. It may have been Silas. But after that, you started to see them try and push the ball downfield. I also thought the run game needed to get involved more. I mean, Dame had 6 yards per carry. And Oregon State only ran the ball 2 times in the fourth quarter. And it was working. But I think this coaching staff is going to, adjust and get ready for a Colorado defense that is by far the worst Oregon State will have played in conference play.
Yeah, I agree. I think, being there live and seeing kind of the way the offense was going, we had this kind of complaint observation the first part of the season where Oregon State was trying to go downfield, looking for that home run ball. When they started to get the playmakers the ball in space and do those short and intermediate passes, we started to see DJ really look comfortable and have success. This week, for whatever reason, and it must have been something they were seeing, but they kept trying, like you said, to go deep. DJ held onto the ball way too long. Mm-hmm. Guys weren't getting open. It just kind of spelled disaster. But like you said, they abandoned the run in an area that, Oregon State wasn't down by that much. It wasn't like they had to go and score 21 points and to make some giant comeback. Offensive line, I thought, blocked really well, given Arizona's front seven. But, I was perplexed a little bit by, Damian Martinez touched the ball 14 times, averaged 6.2 yards a carry. What do you think? Should he be at like the 20, 25 per game?
I think you have to get your best player involved in 20 to 25 touches per game, whether that's all on the ground or whether they try and, get him involved in like screen game more, which we saw a bunch of in fall camp and we really haven't seen a whole lot during the regular season. But I'm confused as to why Oregon State's best player is touching the ball 15 times a game in a game that they lose. And they were in the game. It's not like they were playing from behind the whole time and having to throw the ball. They could have ran the ball, and it was working too. And seeing them steer away from that was another one of the questionable decisions that the coaching staff made in last night's game or Saturday.
Yeah, Charles Pettigene, I'm butchering your name. I'm super sorry. Coach Smith's game management issue aside, Dame's touching the ball 4 times less than in Pac-12 played last year during his starting stretch. I think one issue with Martinez, and we talked about this some, Peter Riley Osborne touched on this a bit in the Trench Report, is Damian isn't the best run blocking running back. So if you're going to go all passing, you're not going to, have him in as much, but to just not have him touching the ball. I mean, Oregon State was looking like they were behind by 3 touchdowns in that, end of the third, start of the fourth quarter when they weren't. And that was the part that I thought was questionable. Defense. Let's just touch on the defense some here. Decimated secondary.
Yeah.
So Oregon State, when I was on the sidelines, Jake, you were texting me. You're like,
yeah,
let's hear. Is Cooper? Well, I look over and Cooper's in a boot. Noble Thomas is sitting right next to him. Tyrese Ivey is out for the rest of the regular season, correct?
Yes. Tyrese is out with a elbow injury and will not play the rest of the 2023 season.
So, I mean, there's 3 guys right there in that secondary. So they had to rely on young guys. So we saw Jack Conne start. We saw Jermod McCoy, true freshman, start. We saw a lot of Andre Jordan, another true freshman. I just want to pop in another comment here from Jermaine Gray about the offense. It says, feels like a load management, but we need to feed the hot hand. This is where we miss Jam Griffin.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, this is where having that third back would be a really nice piece to have. Okay, so secondary is decimated, but we were back to seeing the missed tackles again.
Yeah.
15 missed tackles this week. And really what I saw from Arizona was they were just hitting intermediate, slant routes, and they were picking Oregon State apart. Yeah.
I mean, it really did seem that they were, staying away from throwing the ball towards Jaden Robinson, and they were picking on Jermod and Jordan. But the missed tackling is very concerning. It's frustrating as well after the 2 weeks prior to the bye week, tackling had plagued really Oregon State, especially in the run defense. And now this week in the pass defense, the secondary really struggled tackling. Yeah, they are young, experienced. You have two true freshmen on the field, a walk-on on the field, but still coming off of a bye week where I would imagine that the coaching staff spent a lot of time, imprinting the right tackling technique and going through tackling drills with them. It is very concerning that it didn't get fixed, because Colorado this next weekend, looking forward to Washington and Oregon, these teams have some really talented skill players, and they aren't going to go down on the first contact. So Oregon State really needs to improve at this.
Yeah. So just a little note. I was texting with Peter and Raju, 2 members of our staff, and Raju tells me that Oregon State is 1-4 under Coach Smith after bye weeks, the week following a bye week.
Really?
So that's an interesting stat, because you would think that Oregon State would be better off of a bye week and have that time to rest. So that, to me, says that the coaching staff kind of maybe needs to reevaluate what they're doing during bye week and kind of change some things up. 1-4. So thank you, Raju, for that note. So what went well from it? Let's go back offensive standpoint. What did you like from this week's offensive performance?
Yeah, I really liked how a third receiver stepped up. Jimmy Valson's a guy that a lot of fans have been very high on. He's a 6'3" kid from Texas. He's a guy that has always had the potential but hasn't really shown it on the field. And I think Saturday was his breakout game. I think you're going to see him get more involved in the passing game. Being a bigger guy gives, an element to the offense that Oregon State really hasn't had. I think Jimmy's Oregon State's most talented receiver that's above 6 feet tall. And he's a younger guy too. He's still got 2 years left after this year. And I really do think he's going to step up and cement himself as Oregon State's third receiver.
Yeah, Oregon State's been looking for that. I also want to give a quick shout out to Josiah Irish. Couple huge plays. I think some of it is unsung because he's probably the Beavers' best blocking wide receiver on the field. And that oftentimes gets overlooked. So Josiah, you do a great job blocking, but also in special teams. He was the guy that got down there as a gunner to get that ball knocked down and pin them back. always heads up. And so I really felt that Josiah Irish just needed, and Jimmy Valson deserved quick shout out there. Offensively, what do you want to see worked on?
I would like to see them go back to the passing game that, really made DJ more comfortable. This Colorado defense is terrible, just plain and simple. And they're giving up over 300 yards per game through the air alone. And I think it's going to be an opportunity for DJ to get back to where he was comfortable. Hopefully the coaching staff calls those plays where he gets the smaller, speedier guys, out in space and lets them get to work.
How about defensively? What went well, in your opinion, from Oregon State's defense?
I thought the pass rush, again, wasn't terrible. Oregon State has already eclipsed their sack total from 2022. They have 26 sacks now on the year. Chatfield has been great. John McCartan has been great. It's been really good to see. We did think the pass rush was going to be a strength of this team coming out of fall camp. And this next weekend is another opportunity. Colorado has the worst offensive line, and Shedeur Sanders gets sacked more than just about any other quarterback in the entire country.
So we're going to see Oregon State. Well, also should have had another sack, but they called roughing the passer, which that was what we're going to get in.
Was a sack because the quarterback threw it.
Okay, you're right. Yeah. It was close to being a sack.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you like? I mean, is it pass rush or no? I mean, sorry, tackling? Is it run defense? What do you want to see worked on from the defense heading into the next game?
Yeah, I mean, tackling is still the biggest one. Colorado's got some guys between, Jimmy Horn, Travis Hunter, Xavier Weaver, Dylan Edwards. They're explosive, juicy athletes, and if Oregon State doesn't break down and tackle correctly, then it could be another game that they very well lose.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I think Oregon State now has had some really tough opponents, going back to Utah and then UCLA and then Arizona. And Arizona's a team on the rise. And so to come down and play a team now in Colorado who, like you said, has some good skill position players, but I think Oregon State should be able to do some things. Let's go into, we're sticking with Arizona though, play calling and clock management. Jake, I know you weren't there live, but the end of the second quarter, was kind of a snowball effect of bad calls from the coaching staff. So you start off with Oregon State having 2 timeouts. They are down, what were they, on the 23-yard line?
Something like that, yeah.
Jermaine Gray just said that the roughing the passer needs its own segment. Absolutely, because that, before we jump into the play calling, I want to touch on that because I really felt that was, we can talk about the fake field goal and the lack of the use of the timeouts, but that call right there, I thought it changed the whole dynamic of the game.
Yeah.
Because it basically, you take all this momentum. Oregon State, was it Sione and
Catan?
Mm-hmm. They go in. They force. It would have been a fourth down, I believe.
Yeah.
Gives them a first down, 15 yards, and they end up scoring a touchdown. It basically took Oregon State defense from being celebrating on top of the world to all the air out of their sails, and they did not recover. It was a horrible call. We could go on and on about horrible calls because there was some spotting issues, but that one really did have an effect, I feel, on the game. But let's talk about that, the clock management. Just because you have 2 timeouts, they don't call them. I mean, if you take those timeouts earlier, you might save yourself and have 2 plays. Instead, at 25 seconds, they don't get the play off till 18 seconds, and it's a long developing play that DJ holds on to the ball.
Yeah.
Forcing Oregon State then to go with their field goal. It was rough. And then they bring the field goal out, and then we saw the fake.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what world, and I know Coach Smith, I do have to give him props for actually owning up, taking responsibility, and saying it was a mistake. But when you are on the road in a slugfest game, I don't know in what world you would, and your star running back is not running for 20 plus yards a carry. In what world do you think your kicker is going to run for 23 yards? It was, you do that play when you're the underdog and you're just trying to scrap something together, not when you are, a better team. And those 3 points in hindsight would have made a lot of difference and potentially could have changed, who knows what the momentum and everything else. Anyway, what were your thoughts on that, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely a head scratcher of a decision. I mean, I really don't get on the road in a hostile environment. You're a top 10 team, top 11 team. It's a very close game, and you need to take the points there. I don't get, especially Arizona had seen that look before. Oregon State attempted it, but it didn't. There was a timeout or flag, and so they knew it could be very well coming, and it was. And to me, that was very head scratching. Why you're trusting a kicker, like not a knock on kickers at all, but a 5'10", 180-pound kicker to go and get 20 yards and score a touchdown. It's not like that play is gonna get a first down and then call a timeout. No, you need a touchdown there. When Atticus has been pretty much automatic within 45 yards all year, and they decided to run the ball with the kicker. To me, that's head scratching. It's a terrible play call. It makes no sense at all. You have to take the points. And Oregon State lost that game by 3 points. If Oregon State kicks that field goal, that game is in overtime. Who knows who wins that game?
The coaching staff, they're super competitive. So Coach Smith is questioning himself on that and doing that. But to me, was that the worst call? I mean, Coach Smith has done some crazy gambles and do you think that was the worst one he's called?
Yeah, I mean, there's two really that comes to mind. The fourth down against Washington State in 2019, where Oregon State turned the ball over and gave it back to a hot Washington State team around midfield. Excuse me. That kind of comes to mind. But this to me is a head scratcher that very well could have cost them the game.
Like I said, in 2019, though, Jake, Oregon State wasn't a good team.
Yeah, I mean,
they were scrapping to get whatever they could.
Yeah.
Now you take a team that they don't need to scrap necessarily. They and every once in a while, or if you're ahead, try something. But yeah, this was bad.
Mean, this is a team that, if you look at it, was controlling their own destiny for the Pac-12 championship, for a Pac-12 championship appearance. If they win that game and they beat one of Washington or Oregon, then they're in the Pac-12 championship.
And now they have to win out. And
rely on
a USC loss
a whole lot more than what they did prior to tonight or prior to
and you go from potentially being a top and more than likely being a top 10 team.
Yes, to now
to
15
a
to
lower
20,
teams
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
It is very head scratching, and I do believe this is probably the biggest mistake Coach Smith has made in terms of in-game coaching or adjustments during his 6-year tenure at Oregon State.
Yeah, and in the comments, Clint Moses says, we all know Coach Smith likes to gamble on fourth downs and trick misdirection play calling. It's nothing new. I agree with you, but you have to be smart with it. Like I said, this isn't an Oregon State team that is winning 3 or 4 games a season looking to scrap by. This is a team that is legitimately right in the hunt for the Pac-12 title. And that gamble was costly.
Yeah. I do think Jonathan has done some great things on fourth down. He's made some great decisions, but he's also made his fair share of head-scratching decisions, and this is right up there with the top of them for sure.
Let's see here. We have a few comments. Jim Parkin says, you take the big gambles when you're the inferior opponent. You take educated gambles in strategic situations. The fake field goal was not strategic. Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree.
100% truth. And that's, I think, the drum I've been beating kind of all season. Rip City wants to know, how realistic is it that OSU even has a chance for the Pac-12 title if they won out? If they win out and then USC loses one more game.
Because we would have the tiebreaker over Oregon and Utah.
USC plays Washington this week.
Or unless
So,
Arizona would have I don't know. Arizona might have the tiebreaker over us.
but
And
Oregon State beat Arizona.
no, we didn't.
I mean, not sorry, Arizona. Oregon State beat Utah.
We beat Utah. Arizona would beat us. It's really at this point, it's too far out.
Too far out.
There's
Yeah.
so many. In 2 weeks, the picture will be a lot more clear as to what needs to or what could happen.
So all we know now is the Oregon State does not have any cushion. It has got to win out. Let me pop that down. We're going to keep talking about this a little bit just because it was a big.
Yeah.
Kendon Shirley, knowing we lose that game doesn't sting as much when you know there's a future next year. For some reason, this hurts more because of all the realignment nonsense.
I mean, I totally agree. I think in years past, there's always next year for a Pac-12 championship, but this year it's like, no, like this is it. This is our last chance, and Oregon State is 6 points away right now from being 8-0, undefeated.
Clint Moses still stand on. We should have beaten Wazoo and Zona.
Yeah. I agree.
And Jake, what was the stat you texted me yesterday?
Yeah,
take out the Utah game last year.
Yeah, I posted this on Twitter yesterday, but if you take away the loss to Utah last year, all of Oregon State's losses in the last 2 years have been by 3 points, all 4 of them.
It's crazy.
They're
right there. I mean, but again, that just goes to show that you take the points when you're given the opportunity on the road.
Mm-hmm. To me, the inability to really close out these close games, Oregon State had Stanford. That was kind of a fluke play. Oregon State very well could have lost that game. They've really struggled in one possession games. Especially on the road.
On the road, yeah. So let's see the losses. Then the last 5 losses. I mean, Utah was on the road. USC was at home, but
should have won that game if we
should have won that game. But Washington on the road. Now Arizona and Washington State, all the road. So again, it goes to show you just how you take those points when you have the opportunity. I get wanting touchdowns instead of field goals, but in close games, you take what you can get. Again, then some of my other kind of questions about this game was just abandoning the run. This is an Oregon State team that was able to move the ball. And I know Coach Smith actually addressed a little bit of that they didn't like some of their positions. They didn't make up ground, first down. So then they had to pass it more. But, I still, say that Fenwick and Martinez need to have some more touches. And then just the play call selection of going deep so much. That's not Oregon State's strength. They don't have receivers that can, are going to get open or get separation with that long of development, taking that long. Do the quick hits, do the slants. And that's where we've seen the past couple of weeks, DJ really, really starting to look comfortable. Okay. Anything else to add on all that, Jake, or have we beat this enough and can we move on?
Yep. Time to move on.
Okay. It's time to move on. And that means Beaver Nation, time to move on. We're going to just all Colorado now, all the time for this week. I do want to touch on injury update. So as we mentioned at the top of the show, Ryan Cooper is doubtful for this week. He is in a boot. Coach Smith says day to day.
I would not expect Cooper.
But I do not expect Ryan Cooper Jr. This week. Levengood, I don't expect him. I don't know. Smith hadn't got an update on him as of today at noon. He was on crutches after the game and in street clothes. So I'm not expecting Jake Levengood this weekend. Tyrese Ivey, as Jake just mentioned, is out with an elbow. Noble Thomas and Isaac Hodgins were the other 2 main contributors out. What did Coach Smith have to say about those 2?
Yeah, they really thought that Hodgins could go towards the end of last week. They're expecting Hodgins to be full go for Saturday, and then they are also hopeful for Noble Thomas. They feel like he should be ready, and his return would really be huge, I think. Gives Oregon State some more experience, and I think the difference from the secondary with Thomas in the game this year has been really just night and day.
Yeah, he's actually really stepped up.
Yeah, he's doing a great job.
Yeah. At first, when I saw Thomas, my head immediately thought Skylar, because Skylar's out for the season. I text Jake the picture, and he's like, "What? Noble's not playing?" I was like, "Oh, you're right. That is Noble. That's not Skylar." So both Thomases are out in the secondary. but yeah, Isaac, we saw, and Noble doesn't have anything
long
visible.
term.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't see knee brace, boot, sling, nothing. And same with Isaac. They were both just on the sideline. So hopefully those guys will be able to go. Alton Julian, you know what? Was he? Jim Parkin asked, "Can Alton Julian play more and help the secondary?" I need to pull up because now that you mention it, I don't know if
I don't remember seeing Julian.
Yeah,
play.
I don't remember seeing Julian.
The coaching staff is trying to get him more involved as a linebacker, a middle linebacker, something they're trying out. Depth there isn't really the greatest right now. They have some more depth at the safety spot. During 6 defensive back sets, we also saw Julian play against UCLA a decent amount. I would expect to see more of him as the season really closes out, especially if the secondary depth issues still remain still struggle the rest of the year.
And it makes some sense too if you think about it, because he's such a sure tackler.
Yeah.
But if he has lost any step at all with his speed, move him inside. So Andy Baseball says all those injuries in the secondary are going to hurt against the passing attack of Colorado. We'll try. We're going to talk about Colorado. But what do you think Oregon State's front seven is going to help the secondary there?
I definitely do. Colorado can't run the ball at all, and really they can't protect Shedeur Sanders much at all. I think guys like Chatfield, Lolohea, Rawls, they're all going to have huge games. This is the weakest offensive line Oregon State will have seen, maybe even all season. This Colorado offensive line is not a Pac-12 level offensive line, and there's going to be opportunities for the front seven to come up in a huge way on Saturday.
Okay, so we are going to talk Colorado here in just a minute. But before we do, I think we should just run through the Pac-12 like we always do, Jake.
Yep,
the week that was. So, I think most of our listeners follow Pac-12, but if you don't and you need a recap of kind of what happened, of course, Oregon State fell to Arizona 27-24. Colorado lost to number 23 UCLA 28-16. USC Cal. That was a 50-49 win for USC. When I left my friend's house to head over to the stadium, Cal was up like 40. I think it was 43-29.
27 or 29. Yeah, 29.
So I thought that was done, and then we saw the score flash up. Yeah. So I know Cal went for a 2-point conversion, did not convert, and lost that game. But again, USC's defense once again horrible.
I think
points on the board.
I think this is my third straight week on the podcast saying this, but how on earth does Alex Grinch still have a job?
Yeah,
this defense is terrible.
And they still have athletes. I know their defense is not. But they have athletes.
They've got 4 and 5 stars.
Yeah, all over.
They have the number one recruit in the country from 2 years ago, who's a third-string defensive end. Like, this team is stacked with talent. Just terrible coaching.
Number 5, Washington, 42, Stanford 33. Now, that one was closer for a while than Washington's had a couple weeks in a row where it's been a little closer, I think, than anyone kind of
think Washington's a beatable team for Oregon State, playing them at home.
I've heard that from a couple people.
Yeah, I think they match up. If the secondary gets healthy, if Coop can get back, if Noble can get back to full speed, I feel like Oregon State really matches up well against them. Washington can't really run the ball effectively. And Oregon State, if they can get their secondary right, I think Oregon State has a chance to pull an upset then.
Okay, and then the game that I think probably surprised a lot of people was Oregon going to Salt Lake City. Number 8 Oregon taking on number 13 Utah and just smashing them 35-6.
Yeah, Utah still doesn't have an offense. Oregon they really impressed me. They came out really from the first drive and just blew the brakes off of Utah. And it's a tough place to play, and Oregon really just flat out dominated them. So props to them. That was a great effort.
So your power rankings that you have Oregon 1 now, Pac-12 power rankings. Oregon 1, Washington 2.
I still have Washington 1. I still have Washington 1, Oregon 2, but it's a lot closer than it was last week.
Okay.
I feel like if those teams played at odds, then Oregon probably would have won.
Okay. So the coming week, we have another full slate of Pac-12 games. So no buys this week. This coming week, we have number 16 Oregon State at Colorado, where Oregon State is the 13-point favorite. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I really do. I don't think Colorado is very good. I think they have a explosive offense with some really high-powered skill players, but outside of that, this isn't a Pac-12 team. I think Oregon State. I'm not going to give a prediction yet, but I feel
I'm not ready to do a prediction either. But so UCLA, I feel is good defense, and Colorado was able to put 16 up. Does Oregon State hold them to under 16?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think playing on the road, Oregon State's defense isn't the same as at home. I think if it's at home, then quite possibly, but on the road, playing, I think the best quarterback they've played all year in Sanders. I think Colorado is able to score more than 16 points.
Okay. ASU at number 18, Utah. Utah's an 11-point favorite. Does Utah get back on track?
I think they do. I think this is a game that could be close. I mean, Arizona State's really shown some life over the past few weeks. They beat Washington State, which I don't think anyone really expected that this last week. They found a pretty stud running back in Scatbo, and I think they could play Utah close, but I do see the Utes prevailing due to their home field advantage.
Cal is at Oregon. Is that even going to be? Oregon's a 24-point favorite. Do you think it's closer than that?
I think Oregon covers. I think Cal has found their quarterback in Fernando Mendoza, but I think Oregon is a much more talented team. They're playing at home as well. They've got a lot going for them. I'm choosing Oregon to cover that game.
Number 5, Washington at number 24, USC. Washington is a 3.5-point favorite. You think? I think Washington will win by more, but
so do I. Yeah.
Again,
if USC
giving
can't
the USC,
stop,
yeah.
USC can't stop a nosebleed. How are they going to stop Michael Penix, Jalen Polk, Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, Jack Westover, all these stud skill players? I think SC will score. I think Washington puts up at least 45, 50 points. I just don't see SC slowing them down.
And then Stanford at Washington State. And Washington State is a 13-point favorite. Does Washington State get on track this weekend? They've had a couple weeks here of really struggling mightily against Arizona and Arizona State.
I mean, Stanford to me is really like an Arizona State team. They're kind of confusing. You know, one week they're scoring 45 points against Colorado. Next week, 7 against the Bruins. Then they come out and play Washington really close. And Washington State is not the same football team they were in September. Yeah. Not really sure what went on there, if they got too comfortable. But this is a team that has dropped 4 in a row now, and including one to what many thought was the worst team in the conference. And I think Stanford covers and Washington State wins.
Okay, there you have it. That is the slate of Pac-12 games this week. Or this coming weekend. All games are on Saturday. There's no Friday night games this week. So that will be a fun, got to keep up on that Washington, Stanford, Oregon, as those are Oregon State's next 3 opponents. We're going to take a quick break in just a second, but just for the podcast side of things, we'll be back for the live portion. Just a reminder, though, now is a perfect time to join beaverblitz.com. We are part of the 24/7 network and your source for all things Oregon State football, basketball, baseball. Jake, we didn't put it on the rundown, but I know you were at the exhibition basketball game yesterday. The Lodge is the place. We had a live game thread on Saturday night with I think we hit 12,000 page views on that one. So it is an very active message board and the place to be for all the insight. I just posted my thoughts on alignment and what's kind of on the docket for Oregon or Oregon State and Washington State. So definitely jump in the Lodge and get your membership to Beaver Blitz. And we'll be back in just a minute to start breaking down Colorado. Okay, welcome back to the damn podcast. Now it's time to talk some Colorado. We have talked Pac-12, we have talked Arizona loss, and now we need to break down Colorado. And I want to dig into a little bit. One of the comments we had, recently was they wanted to hear more about the Oregon State's opponent. So we're going to talk a little bit more, go a little in depth here. It is early in the week, so this is where Jake and I are just starting to do our breakdown of the opponent at hand. But let's talk some Colorado. Starting off, what concerns you about going to Boulder to play the Buffs?
I mean, Colorado's has been one of the more hostile environments in conference play this year. They have the highest percentage of capacity filled per game this year. I think they're at like about 110%. So it's going to be a packed game. It's going to be a colder game. It's something Oregon State can't really prepare for weather-wise unless they practice at night, which not sure if that's a possibility, but it's going to be in the 20s and 30s. It's a possibility of snow, most likely not, but there is a chance, and it's going to be a tough place to play. And then turning more on the game itself, I think Colorado's skilled players are some of the best in the Pac-12. Shedeur Sanders is a great quarterback. He's thrown for 22 touchdowns, I think, and only 3 interceptions. It's a great touchdown-to-interception ratio. He is a younger guy. He's a sophomore, junior, and he's really surrounded by great skilled players with Travis Hunter, who's one of the more explosive players in college sports. Xavier Weaver's a transfer, Jimmy Horn, another transfer, and then a pair of newcomers at the running back spot with Alton McCaskill, transfer from Houston, and true freshman Dylan Edwards, who really exploded nationally with the 4-touchdown game against TCU in the season opener. And these guys are juicy. They're explosive. They're going to cause issues, particularly with the Oregon State secondary. And my biggest key to this matchup is slowing down those skill guys.
So I agree with you. But, okay, so another thing that I think it gets overlooked, but Boulder's at over 5,000 feet above sea level. So the altitude is no joke there either. So I think that's another piece there that you have to kind of watch. A couple things, though. So I went into PFF to look at kind of what Shedeur Sanders likes to do. He likes to throw short and intermediate passes between the hashes. So I think Oregon State needs to be ready, for more of those slants. Arizona ran them all night. So this is what he likes to throw. He's also the team's leading rusher. So this is a team, though, that doesn't run a whole lot. No. Shedeur is their leading rusher. He's has 321 yards. But Colorado as a team has only rushed for 629 yards.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's due to their poor offensive line.
Yeah.
And Sanders has those 321 rush yards. He's also lost a lot of yards.
He has lost
sacks. Because this is a team that they give up, I want to say, 6 or 7 sacks a game. I think that's worse in the country. And which is another factor to why those run numbers are so bad.
And then looking at some of their, Travis Hunter obviously is a great talent, plays wide receiver and corner. I would say he's probably a better corner than wide receiver, but he's just explosive on both sides. Xavier Weaver is their number 1 receiver. He comes in with 55 catches from 77 targets. He has 717 yards on the season and 4 touchdowns. Jimmy Horn is next, 470 yards and 5 touchdowns. So those are kind of your 2 receivers to watch. Like I said, Travis Hunter, you've named a couple other guys. But Travis Hunter, he comes in as their top defensive player. He's corner. And then Shiloh Sanders is their number 2 guy, and he's a safety. So where you're saying that their offense is going to give our secondary fits, their strength of their team is going to be their secondary. Is this a game where Oregon State should be able to run the ball?
I think so. This is an offense a Colorado defense that gives up just about 475 yards per game, which is one of the worst numbers in the Pac-12.
165 of those are on the ground is what they're averaging.
Yeah, and so 310 of that's through the air. So while on paper, the strength of this defense is their secondary, Oregon State's going to have a ton of opportunities. They're still they're not really a great defense at all. I think Dame is going to hit 100 yards easy. I think Oregon State's going to come out and run the ball. Really, I don't see Colorado slowing Martinez or Fenwick for that matter down. I think both those backs are going to get at least 10 carries, and I think that should be a goal of the coaches going in, is to get Dame 20 carries, Deshaun Fenwick 10, because that success in the run game is going to open up the play action passing game. Colorado is going to have to stack the box. I'll just really make things easier for, DJ or Childs if Childs is in the game.
You've talked about how poor the Colorado offensive line is, which should be stack up well for Oregon State's defensive front. But how is Colorado's defensive line?
Again, very weak, filled with transfers. Off the top of my head, I don't think they have one guy who's seen significant playing time on that defensive line that was there a season ago. Relatively newer guys to this level of competition. There's some freshmen, there's some guys that came from Jackson State where the competition isn't the same. Yeah, they're talented kids, but they haven't played against Damian Martinez. And I don't think Colorado has faced a running back. An argument could be made for Bucky Irving, but outside of him, I don't think they've faced a running back as talented as Damian.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. So, I keys to the game. One of the ones I put on is that OSU needs to get pressure on Sanders.
Yes,
pressure.
What Colorado likes to do is they like those short crossers underneath. I think Colorado's offensive coordinator Sean Lewis is a great coach. He had success at Kent State where not a lot of head coaches do. He left there, came to Colorado as an offensive coordinator, and his scheme, they like to hit guys like Jimmy Horn, especially on those crossers, the 6-10 yard routes across the middle of the field. And that's where I think Oregon State, if they pressure Sanders and don't let him just sit in the pocket and wait until, the guy comes open across, I think if they can take that away, then Oregon State's going to have a ton of success on defense.
Yeah, I mean, and if they're obviously not a great running team, it makes them very one-dimensional.
Yeah.
That should give Trent Bryce some advantage there.
Yeah, I think this is probably the most one-dimensional team Oregon State will play all season. They really cannot run the football. And Oregon State does still have a really good run defense statistically. While they have struggled against Cal and the Bruins, they really have dominated most of their other games.
You think this is a game that Oregon State can keep the Buffs under 75 yards rushing?
Yes, I definitely do. They're averaging less than.
Yeah, they are averaging less than 100. Are they
probably averaging what
60? 80? Okay,
60 to 80. I think this is, and again, they haven't really played any great run defenses. They played UCLA, so they have a great one. Oregon solid, and then Oregon State. So I think they haven't really faced a ton of tough defenses, and I think Oregon State has the advantage there.
Okay, sack. How many times does Shedeur Sanders get sacked this week?
I think at least 5.
Okay.
Oregon State right now is averaging just above 3 sacks a game, 3.5. They're on pace to hit, I want to say, they're on pace to hit just about 40, which would be their first time getting that number in a very long time. And I think they're going to get a lot closer to that number thanks to really bad Colorado offensive line that is going to allow Chatfield, Rawls, McCartan to spend all day just harassing the Colorado QB.
So this, Colorado secondary is probably the strength of their defense. They have 10 interceptions on the year, just the secondary. Do you think DJ gets intercepted on Saturday?
I think he will make one throw.
Okay.
I think this Colorado defense is one that their secondary tends to make big plays but give up a ton of big plays.
Okay.
And this is what I think is going to happen. I think Travis Hunter is too talented, or even Shiloh Sanders to not have a big play come up. I think playing on the road in a hostile environment, you can expect a quarterback to make one mistake. And I think it is very well possible. However, I do think DJ is he might have one of his best statistical performances all year against a really not great Colorado secondary.
It's funny because there's been a big discussion in the lodge. I finally had to shut it down because it kind of went off the rails, but kind of DJ bashing and asking if Oregon State should be playing Ben Gulbranson.
Yeah, to me that was if you look at Oregon State's offense last year, throwing the ball. I mean, if you look at Oregon State in the Civil War last year, Oregon State was 7 for 16 passing the ball with 2 interceptions.
Yeah.
Now, DJ's worst performance all year was probably against Washington State, where he threw for over 200 yards. I think he threw for 2 touchdowns, or he threw for 1 and ran for 1, and threw just 1 interception. So,
And his PFF rating is still 8th in the country.
yeah, he's still I feel like whether the expectations were too high coming in, just because of his, his background, the guy he was touted to be, but he has been a fantastic quarterback. He hasn't been a Michael Penix or a Bo Nix, but he has been very serviceable. And
well, both those guys, though, to be fair, have been in the system for multiple years.
Yeah, and that too.
And I would also argue that they both have more talent at wide receiver.
They do, and I don't really think that's an argument.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to disrespect Oregon State's wide receivers, but
you don't have a Troy Franklin, a 6'3" guy. They don't have a Jalen Polk or a Roma Dunze. Yes, Silas and Anthony are great, but physically they are limited. They can't go get those jump balls like guys like Franklin and Jalen Polk can.
Yeah. So no, I just thought it was an interesting argument because I'm sure, if one person talks about it on the Lodge, I'm sure there's other Beaver fans out there who are wondering. But I think expectations might be too crazy high for him. But I think when you look at his whole body of work and where he sits, even in the nation, for what he's doing, it's pretty remarkable, and has made Oregon State a better team. Okay, you ready? Are you done with Colorado? Oh, my other key to the game is to run the ball.
Yep.
Flat out run the ball, which we kind of talked about. Won at 30 carries.
Yep. I think Oregon State needs to come out in their first drive and run the ball, establish dominance, and get Fenwick and Dame their 30 touches.
There you go. That's Jake and my keys to the game. We gave you some guys to watch, what they like to do. So it's going to be a fun game. 7:00 kick from Boulder on ESPN, I believe.
Yep.
It's ESPN. Kickoff for Stanford was also announced 2:30 on the 11th. 11th,
yep.
Yes.
November 11th.
Saturday the 11th. So Veterans Day will be a 2:30 kick on Pac-12 Network. Do you want to answer some questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Oh, here's a comment in the chat here. I'll just pop it up because we were just talking about DJ. Jim Parkin, thank you for your comments today. DJU, one of the most physically talented quarterbacks to ever come to OSU. He has 8 games at Oregon State under his belt.
Yep. He probably only has 5 more, too, left.
Yeah. He's a talent. Yeah. So here's a comment from Victor Foster. Please stop leaving points on the field, especially in close games. Amen. 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 Okay. We're going to jump in the Lodge here. Let me pull this up and got some questions for you, Jake, from the members at beaverblitz.com. Let's start with Beaver Love. Was surprised by the many starters who do not play at Arizona, status of injured players, and the duration. Kind of touched on this earlier. We don't, and Smith is really close lip about most of the injuries. Let's just go one more time for you guys. Levengood, unknown doubtful right now, but doubtful. Cooper, doubtful. He did have a boot on his foot.
Right foot. I think it's right foot.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of that right off the top of my head, but I don't know.
He was not wearing one today.
Okay.
I did see him walking through the practice facility. He was not wearing a boot, but still being in a boot a week before a game would imagine he's probably going to be held out. That
screams high ankle sprain to me.
Yeah. Same thing that Jack Conai had.
Yeah. So he's back. Okay, so Levengood we did. Cooper. Tyrese Ivey is out.
Yep.
Noble Thomas is questionable.
We haven't seen Josiah Johnson in a few games either. Coach Smith didn't touch on him. Not sure what's really going on there. Try and find out.
Tyrese Ivey is out season.
Thomas.
Elbow. And then Noble Thomas is out for undisclosed. We don't know. He did not have anything obvious. So, but he was sitting in street clothes.
I also would expect usually there's always a surprise starter or rotational player that isn't available that no one really knows about. So I would expect that there will probably be 1 or 2 guys that we haven't touched on that will be unavailable.
Yes. And it just happened. I mean, this is what happens when they don't let media watch practice. And so we aren't there to see who's, maybe limited or heading into but Isaac Hodgins, they're hoping for. And was Noble Thomas the other one?
Yeah, I would expect. I'm not as certain for Noble as I am Hodgins, but I would expect to see him available.
Okay, so I think those are kind of the guys we know. There's probably a couple others, but those are the big ones. Matt Giafoni, why does OSU go through fits when they refuse to run the ball? I don't know, and I don't know why offensive coordinators. And this isn't just a Lindgren thing. This goes back to Langsdorff, where they kind of get like in this mode that they think they're just going to go deep ball and stop running. How is the Damnation mission to $1 million going? Last I checked, it was right about 500,000. So
pretty
right
solid.
about halfway there. So keep helping out the cause. That is going. Will go toward NIL dollars for football players, I believe. It's helping to pad it, depending on where Oregon State ends up. If they need some cash. Beaver Billy, what is the total number of starters we lose to graduation next year? It seems like a lot. Could be a down year depending on the quality of opponents, if my calculations are correct.
The
We're going to see a lot. The offensive line, in whole.
You're going to lose Bloomfield, Levin Good for sure. Joshua Gray, I would imagine. He has 1 year left, but I would imagine he will probably leave. Tali Fuaga, same boat, would expect him to leave. Receivers, Josiah Irish is gone. Ray Yagi is gone. Would also Anthony Gould is a potential draft casualty, or just being at Oregon State for a COVID casualty in a way. Deshaun Fenwick is gone on the offensive side of the ball, and then most likely DJ Uyunglele as well. Would imagine he takes his talents to the NFL. And then on the defensive side of the ball, the secondary gets hit kind of hard. Jaden Robinson, Katana Odapu, and Ryan Cooper, they're all gone. Linebacker core, it's Calvin Hart, Andrew Chatfield, and John McCartan. And then defensive line, you lose really 3 of your 4 impact players with James Rawls, Joe Golden, and Hodgins. All 3 of those guys are gone. And Josh Green, your starting punter as well. So you do lose more than Oregon State's lost in past years, but Oregon State has been recruiting well, and I would very well bet they're going to hit the transfer portal pretty hard as well.
Yeah, and that's something to think about too. Going into this, if Oregon State, for example, this was something I was thinking about when I was down in Arizona, when I was on one of my little walks, was, okay, so recruiting, prep recruiting, let's say, the top targets are wanting to go someplace where they know there's a power conference home. Oregon State should be able to hit that transfer portal super hard, especially if Oregon State and Washington State are able to have an auto qualifying bid to the CFP.
Yeah. I mean,
the transfer portal is going to become the way to go there, and they should be able to grab some pretty good players. Okay, so a lot of players leaving. Again, this is something Jake and I dive into after the season. This is going to be kind of the after the bowl game kind of thing, where we talk about not only the guys coming in the class of 2024, but really kind of deep dive looking at the roster and what's happening. Go Beavs 2000. What are the chances Martinez transfers? And I don't know whether that means because they're not in a Power 5. I don't really kind of know the nuance to that question. I don't foresee him transferring.
Yeah, there's always a possibility, but I wouldn't expect it. We'll kind of start to hear transfer news start to pick up over the next month or so, I guess, by now.
Next month. Let's see. Mr. G. Gray, are we better team as a 2-to-1 run to pass ratio? Why or why not?
This is a tough question because if you look at last year's offense, it was 2-to-1. Yeah, they didn't struggle. They struggled offensively, but they won games. Whereas this year they're winning games, but they're also losing games that they shouldn't necessarily be winning. I think 2-to-1 is a little excessive. I think Oregon State needs to find their sweet spot, whether that's like split 50-50 or 60-40 run pass. I do think the running backs need to get a lot more involved, especially against Washington and Oregon.
Yeah, my feeling is I don't necessarily think a 2-to-1 run to pass ratio. Last year, like Jake said, they did run more, but that was out of necessity. And I felt Oregon State became too one-dimensional.
Very one-dimensional.
I love that. If they could be in like the 30 to 35 rushes a game. I think that's kind of a good spot. And then depending on, where you are, I mean, obviously if you're down by, 14 or so, you have to throw more. But like I said, against Arizona, they weren't down by that much and they were trying to go deep the whole time. So, and I do think as we saw that last drive, that 2-minute drill, that was, Oregon State does a lot better when they're doing some quick hits and moving the ball. So my suggest, I like that 30 to 35. I think that's kind of the sweet spot for runs. Here for the Beavers says, I think the fake field goal is a distraction from bigger issue since it was only one play. One of the mantras last year was urgency. Does it seem like play calling needs more urgency? For example, see the end of the fourth quarter at U of A and WSU. We had a high-powered offense.
I do think with DJ, he is more comfortable in those high-powered, no huddle tempo. But again, in terms of Oregon State, that's not necessarily their strength. I think I would like to see them try and incorporate the no huddle tempo more when it's needed and earlier rather than, run the ball, but to a certain extent. That's just kind of my 2 cents on that.
RDU Beaver says he said, we ran the ball 2 freaking times in the fourth quarter. My question is more of a request. Can you please read that stat line to Lindgren and ask, what the hell, man? Thank you. He goes, in all seriousness, though, I think Lindgren has been a great OC. For the most part, we've been spoiled by some pretty solid offenses, and it's hard to complain much after the decade we suffered in the 2010s. However, sometimes organizations have success, but after a while, growth starts to stagnate. So, I mean, do you think conversation, or do you think Lindgren needs to take a look at kind of things, or are you happy with where things are right now, Jake?
I feel like there's room for improvement on the road. I feel like at home, again, I don't know whether that's due to, the energy that's already provided, but on the road, this offense hasn't really looked the same. And I do feel like there's room for improvement there. Overall, I'm happy. I feel like this offense, they're still putting up 38 points a game, the most in a very long time. I feel like that's kind of overlooked by a lot of people, but there is still room for improvement that if they improve a little things in both of those 2 losses, Oregon State's 8-0 right now.
So Iversoth, has Coach Smith tried anything different in terms of scheduling and the travel and agenda to address this team's performance on the road? This has been a consistent issue since he's been coaching here. Players are low energy to start the game and have less focus, make really uncharacteristic mistakes.
Yeah, not any changes that I'm aware of. Yeah. There has been struggles on the road. Oregon State at home in the last 3 seasons is 15-1 overall. Now they're just gonna do some quick math. They're 23-11, so 15-1. They're a 500 team. Yeah. They're a 500 team away from Reeser over the last 2 seasons or 3 seasons now. So that is reason for concern. There is something that needs to be changed. I'm not sure what or if the coaching staff is going to do something, but that is at this point I feel like it's not just a fluke. I feel like it's a very valid very valid that this team isn't the same. This team isn't the same on the road.
How do you do that, though? I mean, like, the fans can bring so much into play, and fans meaning either the positive of having fans out there or some of the schools that Oregon State travels to. It's a pretty dead environment. So how does a team generate their own hype?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough to create your own energy. Obviously playing in Reeser, having the Beaver Dam, it makes it a lot easier. It's really loud and live 2 hours before kickoff, and the guys feed off that. Yeah. Whereas on the road, a lot of these stadiums they're playing at is quiet. It's not loud. It's not raucous at all. It's quiet. I think this weekend it's going to be loud and energy, and I think they're going to be able to create some more energy. But really, I do think it hurts Oregon State that the opposing fan bases really haven't been up to par with what they're used to here in Corvallis.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a big test this weekend on the road at Colorado. Oregon State faces Deion Sanders and the hype train that was Colorado. Shedeur Sanders, Shiloh's. My son loves Shedeur Sanders, by the way. He was wishing we were all going.
I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah, it is what it is, but he loves his Beavs. So his birthday is the weekend of Stanford, and he would like to go to that game. So we have to figure that one out. But Oregon State will be in Boulder this weekend to take on the Colorado Buffaloes and look to get back to their winning ways before heading home for 2 games and then hitting the road for Civil War. Make sure you're following Jake Hedberg. He is at Hedberg Jake. I am at Angie Machado 1. And make sure you are following us on beaverblitz.com for all the latest. We will be back next week for another episode of the Damn Podcast.